Hi everybody, welcome to our safety preparedness video. The purpose of our video today is just to cover some basic safety procedures for emergencies. We want to be thinking about these things before they happen so we're not scrambling in the event of an emergency. We're going to cover some basics today for power outages, for fires, as well as severe weather, tornadoes and things like that. The first thing I'd like to talk about today is kind of what to do on a basic normal day when you walk into work. There's some basic steps that you should take at the beginning of your shift to set you up so that you know how to respond to an emergency. So the first thing we want to make sure we're doing every day when we come to work is performing a good safety check. What I always do when I come to work with a client is I just have a quick glance at them as soon as I walk in the door, make sure that the vent looks okay, make sure that they have humidity hung and that the humidifier is working properly if that's what they're currently using. It's also a good idea to look at their tube feeding, make sure the tube feeding is running properly if they have tube feed. Just sort of generally give them a quick once over and make sure that they're comfortable. I always do that as part of my taking of report when I work with a client. It's a good habit to get into. One of the things that we want to make sure that you guys are doing is performing a good safety check, which includes checking on all your equipment at the beginning of a shift. It's always better to catch problems at the beginning of a shift rather than waiting for some kind of emergency to develop. So some of the things that we want you to do, if you are familiar with Trilogy ventilators, we're going to want you to go ahead and check the vent settings for your client. Not only on their bedside vent, but also on their portable vent. The basic procedure is if a vent starts to have problems, we always want to switch them as quickly as possible to the portable backup ventilator. All of our home vent clients have a backup ventilator. It's usually the same. We want to make sure that the vent settings are the same on both of them. So if you have any questions on how to do that, please contact your case manager. In our training, we will also cover how to, scroll through Trilogy vent settings and make sure that you understand how to do that. Make sure that they are the same on both ventilators.
The other thing we want to check is to ensure that the ventilators are charging. There are two types of ventilators commonly seen in the community: Trilogies and Pulmonetics. Most of our clients use the Trilogy ventilator. The Trilogy ventilator has an internal and a detachable battery. The internal battery and the detachable battery both have a 3-hour life. A fully charged Trilogy ventilator with a detachable battery should last 6 hours under its own power. The Pulmonetics LTV ventilator has an internal and an external battery. These ventilators are generally older, and as a result, they don't have the full battery life they did when they were new. Anytime power is lost and your client is on a Pulmonetics ventilator, you need to hook up the backup battery immediately. Do not wait for the internal or external battery to discharge. In practice, we have seen internal batteries last between 10 minutes and 45 minutes, generally closer to 10 minutes. We also see external batteries last from 15 minutes to 4 hours. Again, if you experience a power outage with a Pulmonetics ventilator, get your client on the backup battery immediately.
Another thing to check is our suction machines. Most of our clients will also have a suction machine. They generally look like this. These are also plugged in. Occasionally, if the power goes out, for example, these do have an internal battery, so these should still work without a power supply. It's always a good idea to make sure that this is plugged in and charging properly. Sometimes as these machines get older, these cords can get a little finicky, so it might require that you actually check and make sure that it's seated in there properly and that the unit is actually charging. Just be aware of that. If sometimes it might take more than just glancing at this to know that the battery is actually charging properly. Another thing to be aware of is the oxygen tanks for your client if your client is on oxygen. Every client has kind of a unique setup that requires some specifics. Oxygen tanks are one of the areas that we do see a little bit of difference between what oxygen tanks certain clients have as opposed to other ones. Again, you'll probably have to double check with your case manager, make sure you understand their specific oxygen delivery system. One common thing that we see in the home is we have some tanks that just have a dial that you can adjust the flow rate on. Others have a detachable regulator that has to be seated in, and they have a valve that has to be open. So make sure that you understand how that actually works with your client. The last thing we want to have happen is have a client in need of oxygen as we're fumbling around trying to figure out how to get them oxygen. I really don't want to be in that situation. The other thing to be aware of every shift, make sure that you know where your ambu bag is. The ambu bag is the old-timey replacement for the ventilator. If both your ventilators blow up for some reason, you always have an ambu bag. So make sure you understand where this is for every client. There should be one in your emergency bag as well as one by their bedside generally. Another thing to be aware of, if your client is on oxygen, make sure you understand how oxygen gets to the ambu bag. Sometimes in emergencies it's easy to forget that you have to also connect the oxygen, probably from the ventilator, to the ambu bag in order to provide rescue breaths to your client. So make sure you understand where these are. Keep track of where those are every shift. The other thing I would like to cover is make sure that you know where your emergency bag is. Every client should have an emergency bag. It's going to be different based on every client, how they like their room set up. There are a few basic things that should be in everybody's emergency bag. Again, this is the bag with vital equipment that we would take with them if they needed to go to the hospital or if they needed to go on an outing. Even if it's just a recreational outing, we always want to keep this fully stocked and make sure that we have what we need to deal with emergencies as they might present themselves. So every emergency bag should have an ambu bag inside it. Again, this is in case your ventilator malfunctions completely. As long as you have this, we can still ventilate the client. And again, keep track of what their oxygen needs are. If they need oxygen, make sure that you're connecting the oxygen to the ambu bag. It's always a good idea to have a backup trach in case there's some sort of trach malfunction for our trached clients. Generally, what we want to have is a normal size replacement trach as well as a smaller step-down size trach. The step-down is in the event that you can't get the normal size trach into their airway. The step-down is just a smaller size, so it's generally a little easier. If you do have to insert a downsized trach, probably call 911. That person is probably going to need to go into the hospital for some kind of emergent care. We're not going to want to just put in a downsized trach and think that everything's okay with them. Another thing to make sure is in your emergency bag is sterile water for suctioning. As you kind of get more experience working with ventilator clients, you'll start to familiarize yourself with what they need. Sterile water is necessary for suctioning, so we want to make sure that we have sterile water in their emergency bag. We also want to make sure that we have a small syringe for their cuff. If they have a cuffed trach, that helps to inflate the trach balloon to form a seal in their airway. An obturator is also an important thing to know where it is. There should be an obturator in their emergency bag as well as at their bedside. Again, the point of an obturator is if their trach comes out, it allows some stability for the trach for you to reinsert it easier. Make sure that you understand where those are. Saline vials, lubricant sometimes is needed to help get a trach in. And again, we're talking about an emergency decannulation outside the home. You want to make sure that you have everything you need in your bag and ready to go so that you can get a trach back into them in the event of an emergency. We don't want to see that happen. We really want people to be prepared in the event that it does happen so that they can just correct the situation easily. Other client-specific items might include things like emergency medications. Some clients have seizure disorders. If you are going on an outing, you might need to, for example, grab Ativan for somebody in case they have a seizure disorder. We want to be able to respond to their needs in the community or in transport to the hospital. We just want to be prepared for everything that might come up for them. Hopefully it won't, but we just want to be ready to serve them as well as we can on the fly at a moment's notice. So that's all I have for this section. Thanks, Mike, again here with you. We're going to talk a bit about what to do in the event of a power outage today. So power outages are something that we can't plan for. It can come up at a moment's notice. It can be a little startling, but I think we do have what we need to make sure that we do keep our clients safe in the event of a power outage. So if we are minding our own business and then all of a sudden, oh no, power's out! What are we going to do? It's dark. The vent is going to start making noise because the vent is going to let you know that the power supply has been cut off to the vent. The client's probably going to be concerned because the lights are off and the vent's alarming. Make sure that you just keep the client calm. Just say, hey, it's all right. We just got the power out. We'll get you connected to a backup battery and we'll make sure that the power is going to come back on soon. We'll keep you safe. So what I would do is I would make sure that I know where my flashlight is. If it's nighttime, you might have to do what you can. You might need to get your phone out if you have one. Make sure that you do know where your flashlights are so that it's not quite so jarring if the power does go out. Keep in mind that if the lights go out and it is an overnight shift, it might be pretty dark. The thing that we certainly don't want to do is light a match, light a candle with oxygen. That's just a bad idea, so don't do that. Make sure that you know where your flashlights are if you are working an overnight shift. It could be very, very important if the power goes out. So I'm going to come over here and find my handy flashlight. This is going to allow us to see what we're doing. The most important thing that we need to do, like I said earlier with the LTV ventilators, and you'll learn more about these have about 45 minutes worth of battery life on them with an internal battery. So that's really not sufficient. Most power outages that I've experienced last much longer than 45 minutes. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to switch them over to their backup battery for the LTVs. Generally, it's going to be different for every client. A lot of them look like car batteries. We've got one down here. And this is the power supply cord for the LTV ventilator. So what we would do is disconnect here. Again, this is just two pieces that disconnect. And then we would connect it to the backup battery. This has a 3-prong thing that gets clipped in there. The connection to the vent looks just like this, similar to the other one. You will clip this in like so, and again, that clips in place. Once you do that, it should stop the alarm on the vent that is saying power lost. That'll help you know that you've reinstituted a power supply to the ventilator. These larger batteries, again, they have a few hours of battery life. That's one of the reasons why we want you to make sure that you're checking to see if those are charging at the beginning of your shift. We want to make sure that those stay charged because that's your emergency power supply in the event of a power outage. We want to make sure that those are charged. The backup always is going to be your ambu bag. If we run out of power, the battery's dead, the vent's dead, the power's out, we still have the ambu bag. But if we didn't check all this stuff, we might end up ambu bagging somebody for quite a while until the paramedics show up. So don't put yourself in that situation. Make sure that you are aware of the power situation for your individual client. And keep in mind that there always is a backup. There always is the ambu bag. So don't panic. It's going to be okay. Once we have the client situated, the vent's powered up, the lights aren't on, but we do have a flashlight. They're calm. We've reassured them. Then we want to go ahead and start notifying people. Make sure that we do, first of all, the other thing to think about is make sure that their oxygen is flowing to them. Sometimes they have compressed air that doesn't require power. A lot of our clients also have electric-powered oxygen concentrators, so you might actually need to switch them to a compressed oxygen cylinder to supply oxygen. That's something to be aware of. Make sure that you talk to your case manager and understand how you would deliver oxygen to somebody in the event of a power outage. That could come up.
Now let's discuss what calls to make when the power goes out. Our first call is going to be to the electric company. Each client has an emergency plan in their chart, which has the name and phone number of the electric company. If you are at a group site, the emergency plan is on the wall near the assignment sheet. The address of the client's home or group site is on this same emergency plan. When you speak to the power company, tell them, "I am calling to report a power outage at this address. There are vulnerable adults or children in the home that require electricity for life-saving equipment." It is important to say there are vulnerable adults or children in the home that require electricity for life-saving equipment. The operator probably does not know what a ventilator is or how it keeps our clients alive. Once you inform them of the power outage, ask them, "How long before the power will be restored?" Your next call should be to the case manager during normal business hours or the on-call nurse after hours and on the weekend. They will collect information from you and determine what the next steps are based on the client's unique needs and resources.
So thank you again for your time. That was power outages. Hi guys, it's Mike again. We're going to talk about some emergency procedures for severe weather now. It is getting to be that time of year when we might start to see some severe thunderstorms and potentially tornadoes. It's something to be aware of. Generally, if severe weather is in your area, you will hear a siren that'll indicate that it's probably time to seek cover. It's always a good idea to keep an eye on weather forecasts and know in advance whether or not severe weather is expected for your area. Generally speaking, in the event of a severe thunderstorm or tornado, you want to be away from any windows. You want to try to go to a room that's far away from windows, ideally with no windows. In a strong part of your house, sometimes stairwells are a good choice. Otherwise, internal rooms that don't have windows is usually a good option if you are going to shelter in place for a tornado. Depending on what your client's situation is, that's going to determine not only their room, but their capability. If they are ambulatory, then the simple solution is you just walk to a safe area with them. That's as easy as it can be. If they are in a wheelchair and the tornado sirens go off, just wheel them to safety. It's a good idea to be mindful of where a safe place in your client's home would be in the event of a tornado. Again, we're wanting to stay away from windows. We want to avoid broken glass, flying debris, those kinds of things. If a client is in bed, there are certain steps that you can take. If, for example, there's a tornado outside the window, we can't barricade the windows. Sometimes we might just need to get them to safety. Again, we're talking about an emergency here, life-saving stuff. Essentially what an option would be is just drag them out to safety. So again, rather than having them cut up with broken glass, just do what you can, get the vent ready, drag them off the bed. It's a good idea to keep your knee in place so that they don't hit their head. Do what you need to do, get them down to the floor, support their head, drag them to safety if you need to. Because again, we're talking about a life or death situation here where there might be broken glass flying through the window. They might end up with bumps and bruises, but again, we're trying to save somebody's life by doing this. So keep that in mind. This isn't going to be a perfect world solution. Just do what you can, get them to safety. Another option, if there aren't significant windows, there's always the option to just cover them with something that you think will keep you guys safe. If, for example, they're a larger person and you don't feel like you have the strength to pull them off, the last option is just cover yourselves up with blankets. Do what you can to try to keep broken glass off of the client and off of yourself. Again, this is a situation that we hope not to encounter. If you do start to suspect severe weather might be imminent, it might be a good idea to put your client in a wheelchair, if they do have a wheelchair, so that they are more mobile. And again, just take them out of the danger area, take their vent, take an ambu bag, make sure that you have their emergency bag. Just grab everything that you need to have to get them to safety, and really you're just doing the best you can. Emergency situations are emergencies, so If they end up with a couple bruises from lowering to the floor, that's better than having them gashed up with broken glass. So just be mindful of that. It's a good idea to have a plan and then just execute it when the time comes if you need to. If they do need medical attention, if they do need to be transported to the hospital, again, make sure you bring your e-bag. Make sure you're contacting your case manager, family, and make sure that you bring the chart with you to the hospital. So that's all. If you have any questions, please contact your case manager. Thank you very much. Hi guys, Mike again here. Just going to take a moment to talk about fire safety with you. Again, fires are a thing that can happen. It's probably one of the more scary situations to really think about. The first thing that we want to make sure that we're doing is knowing where your fire extinguishers are. Just have a plan. Again, we don't want to be in situations where we're trying to figure out what to do in an emergency as the emergency develops. So just be aware of the fact that fires can happen. And just develop a plan, think about what you might do in the event of an emergency. So you guys may have heard the acronym RACE before. RACE, again, stands for Rescue, Alert, Confine, and Evacuate, Extinguish. So rescue, again, that's going to be if there's immediate danger. If, for example, something over in the corner is on fire and Manny, the mannequin here, is in direct danger of being burned. Again, we just want to get them to safety. Like we did with the thunderstorm, just pull them off of there. Get them away from the fire, keep them from getting burned, and do what you can. They might end up with bruises. They might end up, burning the hair off their arm. It's fine. Get them to safety. That's all we're really concerned about. That's the first thing you need to do. It might be a little bit more likely that something else is happening in the building. A fire might happen somewhere and you might just be aware of it because a fire alarm is going off. If there's nothing visibly on fire in your client's room, we want to be aware of the fact that one of the biggest dangers with fire is actually smoke inhalation. So we might need to, for example, throw a blanket under the door at the crack of the door right on the bottom here. Boom. That's going to keep some smoke from coming into the room. It's also a good idea to touch the door. Make sure that it isn't hot. If it feels hot to the touch, don't open the door. If it feels hot to the touch, that might mean that the fire is right outside the door, and opening the door could give a rush of oxygen, and it's going to make the whole situation much worse. So be aware of that. Again, we've ensured that the client's safe. We've rescued them from immediate danger. First thing we want to do after that is A. So we've done R. We're going to do A. We're going to alert the fire department. Call 911. Just get your phone out, call 911, let them know there is a fire at the address that you're at. That's pretty much the best thing you can do. They have the equipment to fight fires, you do not. So just get EMS en route as soon as you possibly can. The only thing that you're going to do before that is make sure that the client is safe. So as soon as possible, make sure you're calling 911, getting the fire department involved. So we've done R, we've done A. C is confine. If, for example, we know where the fire is, if there's a fire in the supply room, try to confine it as much as you can. Get flammable things away from it. You might close the door to cut off its oxygen. Close doors and windows. If it's too hot, don't touch it. Don't go near it. Only when you've done all of these things do you want to proceed to either getting yourself and your client out of the building, if that's the safest thing to do, or if the fire is small and reasonably contained, then you can proceed to trying to extinguish it. So we want to make sure that we know where our fire extinguishers are. You may have seen these before. They might all be a little different, but they all generally work the same way. You would pull the pin, you would aim the nozzle at the base of the fire, and you would sweep back and forth until the fire is extinguished. Again, if that ever happens, you need to just go ahead and call 911 anyway. keep in mind that that's going to kind of make a mess. So just be aware of that. Number one priority is just get the fire out, make sure that the client is safe, make sure that you're safe, and extinguish the fire if possible. If they are ambulatory, it's a lot easier. They can just walk away. If they're in a wheelchair, again, you can wheel them to safety. If, for example, they are of sound mind, able to make decisions, and they're completely refusing to be moved, really, you just have to be aware of the fact that sometimes your own safety is also a consideration. So don't put yourself in danger trying to essentially do something that you think is going to jeopardize your safety. Your life is valuable, so don't put yourself in unnecessary danger trying to help other people. Just to keep in mind, if we do have to evacuate somebody to safety, again, we might be dragging them on a blanket out the front door. Get nice and far away from the building, and then you'd want to make sure that you have your ventilator. You might need to just put this on the sheet and drag it out with you. Suction machine, emergency bag, as well as client chart. If they're going to be going to the hospital, again, we're going to need to have their emergency bag, their chart, so that we do have a record of all of the cares that they need. Again, a fully stocked emergency bag, it should be there. You should be doing that check every morning. If they are on oxygen, it's going to kind of be a judgment call. Again, keep in mind that fires feed on oxygen. It might be a better safety decision, depending on the situation, to shut the oxygen off and just get them out. If they do have a portable oxygen supply and it makes sense to bring that with them, then that's okay. Again, just be aware of the fact that oxygen does fuel fires. So just let that be a factor in your decision-making process. These videos, really, they're not intended to be a be-all, end-all safety procedure. Do exactly what Mike says in the video. A little bit of this is going to be up to your own discretion. So please just be aware of kind of the complexity and the different situations that your clients might encounter. One thing to note, kind of a universal signal to the fire department, if you're on the top floor of a building, if you put a sheet out the window, that's kind of a shorthand for the fire department to know that there are residents in that building that'll need to be rescued. So that's something to be aware of. Generally speaking, a lot of apartments have overhead sprinklers, so the sprinkler might go off. That's a good thing. That's not a problem. But just keep in mind that, you know, fires are a scary thing. We want to make sure that we have a plan. Again, just keep in mind the RACE acronym. That'll help get you through these tough situations. Know where your fire extinguishers are. Check them. Make sure they're charged. And if you have any questions about specific things, just contact your case manager, contact Darla or myself. And I hope this was helpful for you. Thank you for paying attention. Again, my name is Michael, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Thank you.